The gunshot that shattered the quiet of the barn sent every horse into a frenzy. But Gideon Reed had already thrown himself flat against the hay-strewn floor before the echo faded into the October night. When he lifted his head and saw her crouched between two stalls, eyes wide with terror and a carpetbag clutched to her chest, he knew his life in Florissant, Colorado, was about to get a whole lot more complicated. It was 1883, and the world outside his ranch was full of desperate people, but none had ever looked quite like the trembling woman who stared at him now with the kind of fear that went bone deep. He raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. The revolver at his hip stayed holstered. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and steady the way it got when he was gentling a spooked mare. "I am not going to hurt you." She pressed herself further back into the shadows, and he could see now that her dress was torn at the shoulder, mud caked along the hem. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever pins had once held it, falling in tangles around her face. She looked like she had been running for days. "Please," she whispered, and her voice cracked on the word. "Please do not send me back." Gideon got slowly to his feet, brushing hay from his shirt. The gunshot had come from somewhere out on the road, not from her. Someone was hunting, or someone was hunting her. "Send you back where?" "Anywhere. Everywhere." Her fingers tightened on the carpetbag until her knuckles went white. "I cannot go back. I would rather die out here in your barn than go back to that house." He had heard those words before, or words like them. His own mother had said something similar when his father's fists had finally broken something more than just her ribs. That was 15 years ago, before consumption had taken her anyway, but Gideon remembered the look in her eyes. He saw it now in this stranger's face. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then lifted her chin with a pride that seemed to cost her everything. "Katherine Bailey. And I know you have every right to turn me out, but I am begging you not to. I will work. I will earn my keep. Just do not send me back to Denver." Denver. That was 2 days' hard ride from here, longer if you were on foot and trying not to be seen. Gideon studied her carefully. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, around his own age of 25, and there was something in her face that spoke of education, of a life that had once included more than running and hiding. "Who is looking for you?" "My husband." The word came out like poison. "Or the man who calls himself that. His name is Thomas Whitmore, and he has money enough to buy every lawman between here and the Kansas border." Gideon knew the name. Everyone in Colorado knew the Whitmore family. They owned half the silver mines in the territory and had politicians in their pockets like spare change. If Thomas Whitmore wanted his wife back, he would get her back, unless someone was fool enough to stand in his way. "How long have you been in my barn?" Gideon asked. "Since yesterday evening." "I am sorry. I know it was wrong, but I saw your ranch from the road and it looked so peaceful, and I just needed somewhere to rest for a few hours." Her voice dropped. "I will leave now. I should not have stayed this long." She started to move, but her legs buckled beneath her. Gideon caught her before she hit the ground, and up close he could see the bruises on her wrists, the split lip that was still healing, the hollow look of someone who had not eaten properly in days. "When did you last have a meal?" he asked. "I do not remember." Katherine tried to pull away from him, but she had no strength left. "Please, you should let me go. If he finds me here, he will hurt you too." Gideon made a decision then that he knew would change everything. He was not a hero. He had never pretended to be anything more than a rancher trying to make a living on land that fought him every season. But he thought of his mother, and he thought of the kind of man who would put those bruises on a woman's skin, and he knew what he had to do. "Come inside," he said. "You need food and rest. You do not understand what you are doing." But even as she protested, Katherine let him help her toward the barn door. "He will come for me." "Then let him come." Gideon kept his arm around her waist, taking most of her weight. "I have dealt with worse than rich men who think they own the world." That was not entirely true, but he said it with enough conviction that Katherine stopped arguing. He led her across the yard to the ranch house, a sturdy two-story building his father had built before drink and anger had consumed him. Inside, the kitchen was warm from the fire he had banked before going to check on the horses. He settled Katherine into a chair and started pulling out bread, cheese, cold venison from last night's dinner. She ate like someone who had forgotten what hunger felt like until it came roaring back. Gideon made coffee and watched her, trying to piece together the story she had not yet told. The calluses on her hands suggested she was no stranger to work, but her speech was educated, refined. Whatever life she had led before becoming Mrs. Thomas Whitmore, it had been a complicated one. "How long were you married to him?" Gideon asked finally. Katherine swallowed a bite of bread and stared into her coffee cup. 8 months. My father arranged it. He owed Whitmore money, a considerable sum from a failed business venture. Whitmore offered to forgive the debt if I would marry him. Her laugh was bitter. My father said it was a good match. He said I should be grateful that a man of such standing would want me. Your father sounds like a bastard. He was desperate. Katherine looked up at him, and for the first time he saw something other than fear in her eyes. I do not forgive him, but I understand desperation now in a way I did not before. What did Whitmore do to you? She flinched at the question, and Gideon regretted asking it so bluntly. But Katherine straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. Everything a man can do to break a woman down to nothing. He wanted a decoration for his arm at parties, and a punching bag for when business went poorly. I lasted 8 months before I realized that if I stayed, he would kill me. It might take years, but eventually there would be one blow too many, one fall down the stairs that I would not get up from. Gideon felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce. He had never met Thomas Whitmore, but he hated him with the kind of intensity usually reserved for rattlesnakes and claim jumpers. "You did the right thing leaving." "Did I?" Katherine's voice was hollow. "I have nowhere to go, no money, no family who would take me in against Whitmore's wishes. I stole his horse to get this far, and when it went lame outside of town, I walked the rest of the way. I am a fugitive now, I suppose. A horse thief and a runaway wife. You are a survivor." Gideon poured more coffee for both of them. "And you can stay here as long as you need to." "You do not know what you are offering." "I know exactly what I am offering." He leaned back in his chair, studying her in the lamplight. She was beautiful despite the exhaustion and fear, with dark eyes that held intelligence and a stubborn set to her jaw that suggested she was stronger than she believed. "I have 60 acres here, cattle and horses, more work than one man can handle alone. You said you would work for your keep. I will take you at your word." Just like that, Katherine searched his face as if looking for the catch, the hidden price. "You do not know me. For all you know, I could be lying about everything. Are you? No. Then we have an understanding." Gideon stood and moved to the window, checking the yard out of habit. Nothing moved in the darkness except the shapes of his horses in the corral. "There is a spare room upstairs. It was my mother's. You can sleep there tonight, and in the morning we will figure out the rest." Katherine rose slowly, still unsteady on her feet. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" Gideon turned back to her, and for a moment he considered telling her about his mother, about watching his father's fists turn her into a ghost long before she died. But it felt too raw, too personal for this first night. Instead he said simply, "Because I can. Because someone should. Because I looked in your eyes and I saw what happens when the world tells a woman she has no choices left." Tears spilled down Katherine's cheeks, but she brushed them away impatiently. "Thank you. I do not know how I will ever repay you, but I will find a way." "Just stay alive," Gideon said. "That will be repayment enough." He showed her upstairs to the room that still smelled faintly of lavender and old memories. Katherine stood in the doorway looking lost, so he found her a clean nightshirt and told her where the wash basin was. Then he left her alone and went back downstairs to clean his rifle and check the ammunition for his revolver. If Whitmore came looking, Gideon would be ready. But the night passed quietly, and when dawn broke over the Rocky Mountains in shades of pink and gold, Gideon found Katherine already awake in the kitchen, heating water for coffee. She had washed and braided her hair, and despite the bruises still visible on her face, she looked more solid somehow, less like she might blow away in the wind. "I thought I would make breakfast," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "If that is all right, more than all right." Gideon hung his hat by the door and watched as she moved around the kitchen with the confidence of someone who knew her way around a stove. "Did you sleep?" "A little. More than I have in weeks." Katherine cracked eggs into a pan and started slicing bread. "I kept thinking I would wake up and find this was a dream, that I was still in Denver in that house. You are here. You are safe." Gideon said it firmly, willing it to be true. "What do you know about ranching?" "Not much," Katherine admitted, "but I learned quickly. My mother was a school teacher before she married, and she made sure I had an education. I can read, write, cipher. I can cook and clean and mend. I can even shoot, though I am not sure I could hit anything smaller than a barn door. We can work on your aim." Gideon accepted the plate of eggs and bacon she handed him. "Most of what I need help with is not complicated. Feeding the animals, mending fences, keeping the house in order. Come winter, we will need to make sure we have enough supplies laid in to last until spring." They ate in companionable silence, and then Gideon took her outside to show her the ranch. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of October day that made a man grateful to be alive. He pointed out the cattle grazing in the eastern pasture, the chicken coop that needed repair, the vegetable garden that had mostly gone to seed but could be salvaged with some work. Katherine took it all in with serious attention, asking questions that showed she was thinking ahead, planning. "How many head of cattle do you have?" "About 40 right now. I lost some to rustlers last year, but I am building the herd back up." Gideon led her toward the corral where his horses watched them with curious eyes. "These are my real pride, though. I breed working horses, sell them to ranchers and cavalry posts. That bay mare there, she will foal in the spring. She is beautiful." Katherine reached out tentatively to stroke the mare's nose. "I have always loved horses, but my father could never afford to keep them just for pleasure." "What did your father do?" "He was a merchant in St. Louis, before everything fell apart." Katherine's voice went distant. "We lived well enough when I was young. Mother taught at a private school and father had a store that sold imported goods. But he started gambling, making risky investments. By the time I was 18, we had lost everything. Mother died of pneumonia that winter and father started drinking. When Whitmore made his offer, father practically shoved me at him." Gideon felt that familiar anger stirring again. "I am sorry. You deserved better than that." "We all deserve better than what we get sometimes." Katherine turned away from the horses, her expression difficult to read. "But we make do with what we have. And right now, I have this chance you are giving me. I will not waste it." They spent the morning working side by side. Gideon showed her how to throw hay to the cattle, how to collect eggs without spooking the hens, how to check the horses for injuries or illness. Katherine absorbed everything with quiet focus, and by midday, Gideon found himself impressed by her competence. She was not afraid of hard work or getting dirty, and she had steady hands that the animals seemed to trust. They were repairing a section of fence when they heard the sound of hoofbeats on the road. Gideon's hand went instinctively to his gun, but it was only his neighbor, Samuel Crawford, riding up with his usual easy grin. "Gideon," Samuel called out, swinging down from his horse. "I was passing by and thought I would check if you needed any help with that fence." Then he caught sight of Katherine and his grin faltered. "Oh, I did not realize you had company." "This is Katherine Bailey," Gideon said carefully. "She is going to be helping me around the ranch for a while." Samuel was a good man, honest and hardworking, but he was also an incurable gossip. By tomorrow, everyone in Florissant would know Gideon had a woman staying with him. Gideon could see Katherine thinking the same thing, her shoulders tensing with anxiety. "Good to meet you, Miss Bailey," Samuel said, tipping his hat. "Though I have to say, Gideon, you are a dark horse." "Did not know you were courting anyone." "I am not," Gideon started to say, but Katherine interrupted him. "We are engaged," she said smoothly, and Gideon nearly dropped his hammer. "It is all very new." Gideon wanted to wait before telling anyone, but I suppose there is no point in hiding it now. Samuel's face lit up. "Well, that is wonderful news. Congratulations to you both." He clapped Gideon on the shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. "About time you found someone to settle down with. This ranch needs a woman's touch." Gideon could feel Katherine watching him, waiting to see if he would contradict her. He understood what she was doing. In this time, in this place, an unmarried woman living alone with a man would cause scandal. But an engaged woman was different. An engagement gave them both cover, bought them time. "Thank you, Samuel," Gideon said, finding his voice. "We are keeping it quiet for now, so I would appreciate it if you did not spread it all over town." Of course, of course." Samuel winked in a way that suggested he would do exactly that. "I can keep a secret." "Well, I will let you two get back to work. Congratulations again." He rode off still grinning, and Katherine and Gideon stood in awkward silence for a long moment. Finally, Katherine said, "I am sorry. I should have asked you first, but I panicked. If word got back to Whitmore that I was here, living with you unmarried, he could use it against us. But if we are engaged—" "It is all right," Gideon said. "You did the smart thing. It will protect both of us." "But now we are going to have to pretend," Katherine said quietly. "People will expect to see us act like a couple. We will figure it out." Gideon picked up his hammer again, suddenly needing something to do with his hands. "It is not like we have much choice now anyway. Samuel will have told half of Florissant before sunset." They went back to work on the fence, but something had shifted between them. The easy camaraderie of the morning had been replaced by an awkward awareness. When Katherine's hand brushed against his as they worked, Gideon felt it like a spark of electricity. When he looked up and caught her watching him, she blushed and turned away. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Katherine said, "We should probably discuss this. Set some ground rules." "Like what?" Gideon asked. "Like how long we maintain this fiction. And what happens when people start asking about wedding dates?" Katherine pushed food around on her plate. "I do not want to trap you into something you did not agree to." "You are not trapping me. We are helping each other." Gideon thought about it. "We can tell people we are having a long engagement, that we want to wait until spring. That gives us time to figure out what comes next. And if Whitmore finds me before then we will deal with it." Gideon met her eyes across the table. "I meant what I said last night. You are safe here. I will not let him take you back." Katherine's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she did not brush them away. "I have been alone for so long. Even before I left Whitmore, I was alone. He isolated me from everyone, made sure I had no friends, no one to turn to. I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone on my side." "You have me now," Gideon said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "Whatever happens, you are not alone anymore." She reached across the table and took his hand, and they sat like that for a long while, neither of them speaking, both of them drawing strength from the simple human contact. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Katherine proved to be as hardworking as she had promised, rising before dawn to help with the morning chores and staying up late to mend clothes or prepare meals for the next day. She learned quickly, mastering tasks that Gideon would have expected to take weeks. More than that, she seemed to bloom in the mountain air, the fear gradually leaving her eyes as she realized that Whitmore was not going to materialize out of the darkness to drag her back. Gideon found himself looking forward to her presence in ways that had nothing to do with the work she did. He liked the sound of her humming as she hung laundry to dry. He liked the way she talked to the horses as if they could understand every word. He liked coming in from a long day of mending fences to find her at the kitchen table, reading one of the few books he owned by lamplight. He was falling in love with her, he realized one night as he lay in bed listening to the wind rattle the shutters. It had happened so gradually that he had not noticed until it was too late to stop it. Katherine Bailey, with her bruised hands and fierce spirit, had worked her way into his heart without even trying, but he kept that knowledge to himself. She had been through too much, needed time to heal. The last thing she needed was him complicating things with feelings she might not return. So Gideon played his part of the patient fiancé, and tried not to think about how much he wanted to make that fiction real. November came with the first serious snowfall, and Florissant transformed into a winter wonderland. Katherine stood at the kitchen window watching the flakes fall, and there was something peaceful in her expression that Gideon had not seen before. "I love snow," she said when she noticed him watching her. "When I was a child in St. Louis, winter was my favorite season. Everything felt clean and new." "Not much stays clean here once the cattle get to it," Gideon said, coming to stand beside her. "But it is beautiful while it lasts." They were standing close enough that he could smell the soap she used, feel the warmth radiating from her body. Katherine turned to look at him, and there was something in her eyes that made his breath catch. "Gideon," she started to say, but the moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. They both froze. It was late after dark, and they rarely had visitors at this hour. Gideon grabbed his rifle from above the door and gestured for Katherine to move back. "Get upstairs," he said quietly. "Now. But if it is him, I will handle it. Go." Gideon waited until he heard her footsteps on the stairs, then called out, "Who is it?" "Marshal Davies from Denver," came the reply. "Open up, Mr. Reed. I need to speak with you." Gideon's blood ran cold. The Denver marshal. That could only mean one thing. He opened the door but kept the rifle visible, letting Davies know this was not going to be easy. Marshal Davies was a stocky man with a thick mustache and eyes that had seen too much. He looked tired and cold and not particularly happy to be standing on Gideon's porch. "Mr. Reed, I am looking for a woman named Katherine Whitmore. I have reason to believe she might be in this area." "What do you want with her?" Gideon kept his voice level, unthreatening. "Her husband has filed charges, horse theft among other things. He wants her brought back to Denver to face justice." Davies stamped his feet against the cold. "Look, I know this is an awkward situation. Can I come in?" "It is freezing out here." Gideon did not move from the doorway. "I have not seen any woman matching that description, Marshal." "That is funny," Davies said, his tone sharpening. "Because I spoke with Samuel Crawford in town, and he mentioned you had gotten yourself engaged to a woman named Katherine Bailey. Now that is quite a coincidence, do not you think? There are a lot of women named Katherine in this territory. Mr. Reed, I am trying to be reasonable here." Davies shifted his weight, hand moving toward his own weapon. "If she is here, you need to turn her over. Harboring a fugitive is a crime. You could lose everything. Then you better come back with a warrant, Gideon said flatly. Because without one, you are just a man standing on my porch making accusations, and I do not take kindly to that. They stared at each other for a long moment, and Gideon could see Davies weighing his options. Finally, the marshal sighed. I will be back, Mr. Reed. And when I come back, I will have that warrant. If Mrs. Whitmore is here, I would advise you to convince her to come willingly. It will go better for both of you. Good night, Marshal. Gideon shut the door in his face and waited until he heard Davies's horse ride away before lowering the rifle. Katherine appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale. He found me. He found the area, Gideon corrected. He does not know for certain you are here, but he will come back, and next time he will have the law on his side. Then I need to run again. Katherine descended the stairs quickly, already planning her next move. If I leave now, I can be in Wyoming before he comes back. And then what? Gideon caught her arm gently. You keep running for the rest of your life. Katherine, that is not living. What choice do I have? Her voice broke. I cannot let you lose your ranch because of me. You have already risked too much. Gideon pulled her close without thinking, wrapping his arms around her. She resisted for only a moment before collapsing against him, and he could feel her shaking. We will figure something out, he murmured into her hair. I promise you we will find a way. How? Whitmore has the law on his side. He has money and power and connections. What do we have? We have each other. Gideon pulled back just enough to look at her face, and we have the truth. You did not steal that horse, you borrowed it, and you had every right to leave a man who was killing you by inches. But that is not how the law will see it. Katherine wiped her eyes. I am his wife, his property. That is all that matters. Not to me. Gideon cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. Listen to me. You are not property. You are a person, a strong, brave, incredible person who deserves to be free, and I will fight for that freedom with everything I have. Why? Katherine whispered. Why do you care so much? Because I love you. The words were out before Gideon could stop them, raw and honest and true. I have been falling in love with you since the night I found you in my barn. And I know this is terrible timing, and you probably do not feel the same way, but I cannot let you run off into the snow thinking no one cares what happens to you. I care. I care more than I have ever cared about anything. Katherine stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Then she kissed him, fierce and desperate and full of all the emotion she had been holding back. Gideon kissed her back, wrapping his arms tight around her waist, and for a moment the rest of the world fell away. When they finally broke apart, Katherine said, I love you too. I have been so afraid to admit it because I thought it would make everything harder, but I do. I love you, Gideon Reed, and I do not want to run any more. Then we fight, Gideon said firmly. We fight and we win. How? Gideon thought about it, turning possibilities over in his mind. Whitmore filed charges for horse theft, right? That is a property crime. But if you were never legally married to him, then the horse was not his property to claim you stole. But we were married, Katherine said, in a church with a priest and witnesses. Were you? Gideon pressed. Or did your father sell you to a man and a corrupt priest looked the other way? Because I have heard stories about Whitmore, about how he has bribed officials before. What if that marriage was never legal to begin with? Katherine's eyes widened. You think he falsified the records? I think it is worth investigating. And even if the marriage was legal, we can prove what he did to you. Those bruises, the way he isolated you, we can build a case for why you had to leave. Who would believe me over him? I would, and I am not the only one. Gideon took her hand. There is a circuit judge who comes through here, Judge Hartwell. He is honest, one of the few men in the territory who cannot be bought. If we can get your case in front of him, we might have a chance. It was a slim hope, but it was hope nonetheless. Katherine squeezed his hand. "All right. We fight." They spent the next 2 days gathering evidence, preparing their case. Gideon rode into town and quietly spoke with people who had dealt with Whitmore in the past, collecting stories of threats and intimidation. Katherine wrote out a detailed account of her marriage, documenting every incident of abuse, every time Whitmore had hurt her or made her feel like less than human. Marshal Davies did not return immediately, which gave them more time than they had expected. But on the third day, as Gideon was coming back from checking the cattle, he saw smoke rising from the direction of town. Lots of smoke, the kind that meant a major fire. He rode hard for fluorescent and found half the main street in flames. The general store was burning, and people were running everywhere trying to save what they could. Gideon jumped down from his horse and joined the bucket brigade, passing water hand over hand until his arms ached and his lungs burned from the smoke. It took hours to get the fire under control, and by then the general store was nothing but charred ruins. The owner, old Mr. Patterson, sat on the ground looking shell-shocked. "Everything," he kept saying. "Everything is gone. What started it?" Gideon asked Samuel, who was covered in soot and exhausted. "They are saying it was lightning, but I do not know. That storm last night was not that bad." Samuel coughed and wiped his face. "Gideon, there is something you should know. I saw Marshal Davies in town earlier, talking to some men I did not recognize. They looked like hired guns, and they were asking about your ranch." Gideon felt ice in his veins. "How many men?" "3 that I saw, not counting Davies." Samuel grabbed his arm. "You need to be careful. Whatever is going on with that fiancé of yours, it is bigger than just a runaway wife case." Gideon did not wait to hear more. He rode back to the ranch faster than was safe, his mind racing with possibilities, all of them bad. If Whitmore had sent hired guns, he was not planning to take Katherine back alive. He was planning to make an example of her, maybe make Gideon disappear too, so there would be no witnesses to what had really happened. He burst into the ranch house to find Katherine exactly where he had left her, safe and unharmed, and the relief nearly knocked him over. "We need to go," he said, already grabbing supplies. "Right now." "What happened?" Katherine was on her feet immediately, reading the urgency in his face. "Whitmore sent men. They are coming here." Gideon threw together food, ammunition, blankets. "We are going up into the mountains. There is a cabin I know, a trapper's place that has been abandoned for years. We can hide there until Judge Hartwell arrives." "When is that?" "Next week." Gideon stopped and looked at her. "I know it is not perfect, Katherine, but it is the best chance we have." Katherine crossed to him and took his face in her hands. "Then we take it, together." They loaded 2 horses with as much as they could carry and rode out just as the sun was setting. Gideon led them up into the foothills, following trails he had learned as a boy. The temperature dropped as they climbed, and Katherine huddled in the coat he had given her, but she did not complain. They reached the cabin well after dark. It was a rough structure, barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it had a fireplace and would keep them hidden. Gideon got a fire going while Katherine unpacked their supplies, and they ate a cold dinner of bread and cheese. "How long can we stay here?" Katherine asked, sitting close to the fire. "As long as we need to. I have hunting gear and there is a stream nearby for water." Gideon fed another log to the flames. "It will be rough, but we will manage." Katherine was quiet for a moment, then said, "I never thought my life would turn out like this. When I was a girl, I imagined I would marry someone kind, have children, live a simple, peaceful life. Instead, I got Whitmore and violence, and now I am hiding in a cabin in the mountains like an outlaw." "You are not an outlaw, you are a survivor." Gideon moved closer to her, pulling her against his side, And when this is over, you will have that peaceful life, I promise you. With you, Katherine looked up at him, hope and fear mixed in her eyes. If you will have me. For real this time, not just pretend. Gideon's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. I know I am not what you imagined as a girl. I am just a rancher, no money or fancy connections. But I love you, Katherine. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy if you will let me. Katherine's answer was to kiss him again, and this time there was nothing desperate about it. It was slow and sweet and full of promise. When she pulled back, she was smiling. Yes, yes to everything. When this is over, I want to marry you for real. I want to build a life with you. They spent that night wrapped in each other's arms, talking about the future they would build together. Katherine told him about her dreams of having a garden, maybe teaching local children to read. Gideon talked about expanding the ranch, breeding better horses. They made plans as if they had all the time in the world, as if Whitmore's hired guns were not somewhere below them in the valley, hunting. The next few days were tense. Gideon would ride down to a vantage point where he could watch his ranch, and twice he saw men searching the property. They were methodical and professional, the kind of men who would not give up easily. But they did not seem to know about the cabin, and as the days passed without discovery, Gideon began to hope they might actually make it to the judge's arrival. On the 5th day, Katherine was cooking rabbit stew when Gideon came back from his watch looking grim. "What is it?" she asked immediately. "They set fire to the barn." His voice was flat with suppressed rage. "I watched them do it. They wanted to smoke us out, see if we were hiding there." Katherine went pale. "The horses. I had already moved them to the upper pasture. They are fine." Gideon sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "But the barn is gone. Most of my hay stores too. I do not know how I am going to feed the cattle through the winter now." "We will figure it out." Katherine knelt in front of him, taking his hands. "After we deal with Whitmore, we will rebuild. Together." Gideon pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "I am sorry. I knew helping you would cost me, but I did not think they would burn me out. I am the one who is sorry. This is all my fault." "No." Gideon tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "This is Whitmore's fault. He is the one who could not let you go, who sent men to terrorize innocent people. Do not take his crimes on your shoulders." They held each other as the afternoon light faded, drawing strength from the simple fact of being together. That night, wrapped in blankets by the fire, they made love for the first time. It was tender and unhurried, both of them savoring every touch, every kiss. Katherine cried when it was over, but they were good tears, healing tears. "I did not think I would ever feel this again," she whispered against his chest. "Whitmore made me believe I was broken, that I could never be intimate with anyone without fear. But with you, I feel whole." "You were always whole," Gideon said, kissing her forehead. "He tried to break you, but he failed. You are the strongest person I have ever known." On the 7th day, Gideon rode down to meet with Samuel, who had agreed to act as a messenger. They met at a neutral spot away from the ranch, and Samuel's news was mixed. "Judge Hartwell arrived yesterday," Samuel said. "He is hearing cases today and tomorrow, but Whitmore himself showed up too with more men. He is pushing hard for Davies to arrest you for harboring a fugitive." "What about the fire? Did anyone connect Whitmore's men to that?" "A few people have suspicions, but no proof. And Whitmore is throwing money around, making sure people keep their mouths shut." Samuel looked troubled. "Gideon, I think you should know. Whitmore is telling everyone that Katherine is insane, that she is dangerous. He is building a case to have her committed to an asylum." Gideon felt sick. An asylum. That would be worse than prison, worse than death in some ways. Once they locked Katherine up in one of those places, she would never get out. "Can you get a message to Judge Hartwell?" Tell him I need an emergency hearing, that I have evidence of abuse and attempted murder. I can try. Samuel pulled out a letter. This came for you from a lawyer in St. Louis. Gideon tore open the envelope and read quickly. Then he started to smile. Katherine's father. Before he died last month, he wrote a confession. He admitted that Whitmore bribed him to fake Katherine's consent to the marriage, that she was never properly informed of what she was agreeing to. This lawyer is willing to testify that the marriage was fraudulent from the beginning. That is perfect. If the marriage was not legal, then everything Whitmore is claiming falls apart. Get this to Judge Hartwell immediately, Gideon said, handing over the letter, and tell him we will be at the courthouse tomorrow morning, ready to present our case. Samuel rode off, and Gideon returned to the cabin to tell Katherine. She listened to the news about her father with a complicated expression, grief and anger and relief all mixed together. He tried to make amends, she said finally. That is something, I suppose. It does not forgive what he did, but at least he tried to fix it before the end. It gives us the evidence we need to fight back, Gideon said. Tomorrow we go to town. Tomorrow we end this. They spent that evening preparing, going over their testimony, making sure they had every piece of evidence organized. Katherine was nervous but determined, and Gideon had never been more proud of her. She had every right to be terrified, but she was facing her fear head-on. They rode into Florissant just after dawn, entering from the back way to avoid being seen before they reached the courthouse. The building was already crowded with people eager to see the showdown. Gideon kept Katherine close, one hand on his revolver, watching for Whitmore's hired guns. Judge Hartwell was a tall man with silver hair and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He looked over the assembled crowd and said, I understand we have an emergency petition here. Mr. Reed, Mrs. Whitmore, please approach. Whitmore stood up, and Gideon got his first look at Katherine's husband. He was handsome in a cold way, with expensive clothes and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. When he saw Katherine, his expression darkened with rage. Katherine, Whitmore said, his voice dripping false concern. Thank God you are safe. I have been so worried about you. Come here, darling. Let us go home and forget this unpleasantness. No, Katherine's voice rang out clear and strong. I am not going anywhere with you, Thomas, and I am here to present evidence that our marriage was fraudulent from the beginning. Whitmore's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cruel man beneath. Then he composed himself and turned to the judge. Your Honor, my wife is not well. She has been suffering from a nervous condition. I am only trying to help her. Then you will not mind if we examine the evidence, Judge Hartwell said mildly. Mr. Reed, you have documents. Gideon presented the letter from the St. Louis lawyer, along with Katherine's written testimony and statements from people in Denver who had witnessed Whitmore's controlling behavior. The judge read through everything carefully, occasionally looking up to study Whitmore's face. Finally, Judge Hartwell said, Mrs. Whitmore, is it true that you did not provide free consent to this marriage? Yes, Your Honor. Katherine stood straight, not cowering. My father told me I had to marry Mr. Whitmore or we would lose our home. I was not informed I had any choice in the matter, and when I tried to leave, Mr. Whitmore beat me and threatened to kill me if I tried again. That is a lie, Whitmore exploded. She is making all of this up because she was caught with another man. She is an adulteress and a thief. I have seen the bruises, Mr. Whitmore, Judge Hartwell said coldly, and I have read the confession from her late father. This marriage was obtained through coercion and fraud, which makes it legally void. Furthermore, based on the evidence of physical abuse, I am issuing a restraining order. You are not to approach Mrs. Bailey within 100 yards or you will be arrested. This is outrageous. Whitmore turned to Marshal Davies. Arrest her. She stole my horse. If the marriage was void, then Mrs. Bailey had every right to take whatever she needed to escape, Judge Hartwell said. And even if that were not the case, property theft does not justify the kind of violence described in these documents. Marshal Davies, I want you to investigate Mr. Whitmore's activities while he has been in Colorado. If he or his men were responsible for the barn fire at Mr. Reed's ranch, I want charges filed. Davies looked uncomfortable but nodded. Whitmore's face had gone purple with rage. You cannot do this. Do you know who I am? I will have your job. I will have you removed from the bench. You are welcome to try, Judge Hartwell said calmly. But in the meantime, this hearing is concluded. Mrs. Bailey is a free woman and you, Mr. Whitmore, are dismissed. Get out of my courtroom. For a moment, Gideon thought Whitmore might try something violent. But there were too many witnesses, too many people watching. Whitmore turned on his heel and stormed out, his hired men following. The crowd erupted in whispers and exclamations. Katherine swayed on her feet and Gideon caught her. It is over, he said, hardly believing it himself. You are free. She turned in his arms and kissed him in front of everyone, not caring who saw. When they broke apart, she was laughing and crying at the same time. I am free. I am really free. Judge Hartwell smiled down at them from his bench. Congratulations, Miss Bailey. I hope you will find happiness now. Then he looked at Gideon. And you, Mr. Reed, you are a good man. Your mother would be proud. Gideon was startled. You knew my mother. I presided over the inquiry after your father's death. She spoke very highly of you, even at the end. Hartwell's expression softened. She would be glad to know you helped someone the way no one could help her. They left the courthouse hand in hand, walking out into the bright November morning. People congratulated them as they passed, and Samuel clapped Gideon on the back hard enough to hurt. But Gideon barely noticed. All he could see was Katherine, radiant with freedom and joy. They rode back to the ranch slowly, savoring the moment. The burned barn was a stark reminder of what the fight had cost, but Gideon could not bring himself to care. They were alive together and free. Everything else could be rebuilt. That night, in the kitchen of his ranch house, Gideon knelt before Katherine with a ring that had been his mother's. I know we already decided, but I want to do this properly. Katherine Bailey, will you marry me? Will you spend the rest of your life with me, building something good on this land? Yes, Katherine said, tears streaming down her face again. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony in Florissant with half the town in attendance. Katherine wore a simple blue dress that Samuel's wife had helped her make, and Gideon wore his best suit. Judge Hartwell performed the ceremony, making sure every word was legal and binding. When Gideon kissed his bride, the crowd cheered, and for a moment he could not believe how lucky he was. This woman who had come to him broken and desperate was now his wife, his partner in everything. They would face whatever came next together. The winter was hard, as winters in Colorado always were. They rebuilt the barn with help from neighbors, and Gideon sold some of his horses to buy hay for the cattle. Katherine proved to be a natural rancher's wife, working beside him from dawn to dusk, and never complaining about the harsh conditions. But she also brought something new to the ranch, something it had never had before. She started teaching local children to read in the evenings, and soon the ranch house became a gathering place for families. Katherine would lead lessons while Gideon worked on harnesses and other equipment, and the sound of children's laughter filled rooms that had been silent for too long. Spring came with crocuses pushing through the last snow, and Katherine announced she was pregnant. Gideon swept her into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. They would have a family, a real family built on love instead of fear. The baby was born in late October, Exactly 1 year after the night, Gideon had found Katherine in his barn. He was a healthy boy with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn chin. They named him Gabriel, and Gideon held his son and thought about second chances, about how life could surprise you with grace when you least expected it. Katherine recovered quickly from the birth, and soon she was back to her routines, though now with a baby strapped to her back as she worked. Gideon watched her one afternoon as she hung laundry while Gabriel slept, and he marveled at her strength. She had survived things that would have broken most people, and here she was, thriving. "What are you staring at?" Katherine called to him, smiling. "My wife," Gideon called back. "The most beautiful woman in Colorado." She laughed and threw a wet shirt at him, and he caught it and used it as an excuse to pull her close for a kiss. Gabriel woke up and squawked in protest at being squished between them, and they both laughed. News filtered to them occasionally from Denver. Whitmore had been arrested for bribing public officials and was facing trial. His business empire was collapsing, and there were rumors he would spend years in prison. Katherine listened to these reports with a quiet satisfaction, but mostly she did not think about him at all. He was the past, and she was focused on the future. They added more children over the years, a daughter named Grace, then another son named Isaac. The ranch prospered as Gideon's reputation for breeding good horses spread throughout the territory. Katherine's school grew too, and eventually they built a proper schoolhouse on the property where she could teach more students. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Gideon took Katherine up to the cabin where they had hidden from Whitmore's men. It was autumn again, the aspens turning gold in the mountain light. They sat by the stream and watched their children playing, and Katherine leaned her head on Gideon's shoulder. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking me in that night?" "Your life would have been simpler if you had turned me away." "Not for 1 second," Gideon said firmly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children, this life we have built together. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the burning barn, even that." He kissed the top of her head. "Though I could have done without Whitmore's face, that was unpleasant." Katherine laughed, that free, uninhibited laugh he loved so much. "I love you, Gideon Reed. Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for never sending me back." "I love you too," Gideon said. "And that is a promise I will keep until my last breath." They sat together as the sun set over the mountains, their children's laughter echoing through the valley, and Gideon thought about that night in the barn. He had been looking for escaped horses and instead found his entire future. Sometimes life gave you exactly what you needed in the most unexpected ways. Katherine had come to him desperate and afraid, and he had given her shelter. But she had given him so much more in return. She had given him love, family, purpose. She had transformed his lonely ranch into a home filled with warmth and laughter. She had taught him that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was simply refuse to give up. As they walked back down to the ranch together, their children running ahead, Gideon took Katherine's hand. She squeezed back, and no words were needed. They had survived the darkness and found their way to the light together. They had built something beautiful and lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. The years continued to pass in the way years do, marked by seasons and celebrations and the small daily moments that made up a life. Gabriel grew into a capable young man who loved the land as much as his father did. Grace inherited her mother's gift for teaching and her stubborn refusal to accept injustice. Isaac was the dreamer, always planning adventures beyond the horizon. Gideon and Katherine watched their children grow with pride and joy, knowing they had broken the cycle of violence and fear that had marked their own childhoods. They had created something better, something worth fighting for. Their ranch became known throughout Colorado not just for the quality of its horses, but for the warmth of its hospitality. No one who came to their door in need was ever turned away. On quiet evenings, when the children were in bed and the chores were done, Gideon and Katherine would sit on the porch and watch the stars emerge over the mountains. Sometimes they talked about the past, about how far they had come. But mostly they lived in the present, grateful for each day they had together. Katherine never fully lost the caution that came from surviving what she had survived. Sometimes she would wake from nightmares, and Gideon would hold her until the fear passed. But those moments became rarer as time went on, replaced by nights of peaceful sleep and dreams of tomorrow. And when they were old and gray, sitting together on that same porch with grandchildren playing at their feet, Katherine would sometimes think back to that terrified girl hiding in a barn, convinced she had nowhere left to run. She would think about the cowboy who had found her and offered her not just shelter, but hope. She would think about the words that had changed everything. "Please do not send me back," and he never did. He kept her safe, loved her fiercely, and built a life with her that exceeded anything she had dared to dream. They had started in darkness and fear, but they ended in light and love, surrounded by the family they had created together. It was more than a happy ending. It was a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and the simple human choice to do what is right even when it costs you everything. It was proof that sometimes the person who needed saving could end up saving you right back. And it was a love story that would be told in Florissant for generations to come, about the cowboy who found a woman hiding in his barn and gave her not just shelter, but a home, a family, and a love that lasted forever.